Welcome back to Northwest City Politics in the Know with Juanita. We're glad that you're joining our show again this week. We're glad that there's people like you that are interested in the issues that are important in our cities. We're glad that you're wanting to keep up and know what's happening throughout all of our cities. If you haven't watched us before, each week we'll have somebody on from one of the 9 cities in Northwest Community Television's viewing area to talk about the issues in that particular city, and that you can, if you're in that city, you can keep up with them. If they concern you, then you can be in contact with your mayors and city council people. And then from time to time, like tonight, we'll have on issues that affect all of us. Now, an issue that's of concern kind of across the country is the number of people that are voting. It seems to be kind of going down a little. Our northwest suburbs are pretty good, but we thought we'll replay some information that we got from Rachel Smith, Hennepin County Elections Supervisor, to talk about what's involved in voting so that you'll know more about it. Now this year, Golden Valley is having a city election, so we're going to aim this particularly at Golden Valley voters, but also at all of you, so that you can think about it. If you haven't been involved in elections, there's plenty of time for Golden Valley people to find out who's running in Golden Valley. You can watch our shows during the month of October to learn about the candidates. You can watch the League of Women Voters information. You can look at information that's put into the Sun Post. There's lots of places where there'll be information out about candidates. But then when it comes time to voting, sometimes people haven't voted for a while, or they're not quite sure what to do. So we're going to go over a number of pieces of information, and I'll put up a couple of websites. Hennepin County Elections will tie you directly into the Minnesota Secretary of State office that'll give you complete information on what you have to do if you haven't voted for a while, where you can check. You can go into Hennepin County and it'll bring you right over, and there you'll find information just under the issue of voting. There'll be information on what does it take to be a qualified voter, so you can check that out. Then there'll be information on how to register to vote. You can register to vote by going to your city hall. You can go to Hennepin County offices downtown. You can go to the service center offices like at Ridgedale and Brookdale. But now the legislature has authorized that you can also do it online. There are certain pieces of information that you need to have, but you can get that information from the Hennepin County website. And there'll be also information on polling places. Where do you go to vote? Because that sometimes stops people, because if they haven't voted, they don't know exactly where to go. You can always get this information from your city hall, but if you're an internet user, like most of us are nowadays, you can plug in information and find out exactly where you need to go vote. So there's a lot of information available on this website, and Rachel Smith, who was the previous head of voting for Hennepin County, is going to share a lot of that information with us. So we're glad that you're interested in the cities, but also we'll want to, if you haven't voted for a while, maybe stimulate you into thinking about maybe I should vote, or I should get registered and be ready to vote, particularly if you're in the city of Golden Valley. I'm very happy to have as a guest tonight Rachel Smith, who's the election manager for Hennepin County. And we're going to talk tonight about issues for people to help them become aware of, how do I get registered? How do I vote? What happens if I have to do an absentee ballot? And hopefully give some information that'll help those of you out there prepare to get ready for voting this fall, because it's important elections coming up in November. And I thought maybe we could talk a little bit as we're starting, and we'll mention it all the way along, but if somebody has some questions about election issues, what's the easiest way, or how can they find answers?
Well, I think there's really 2 good websites out there. One, I think, is the Hennepin County website. We just revised our website to really make information more accessible for really getting good information. And so, the Hennepin County Elections website. I think the other good one is the Secretary of State's website. So between the 2 of them, I think they provide a lot of good resources. And in some cases, we actually link to the Secretary of State website for some really good information as well.
Yeah, I used both websites when I was preparing to learn more than I knew from just going into a voting booth and voting.
Yes.
And there's just a wealth of information there. And it was easy to work your way through it and find information, I thought.
Oh, good. I'm really glad to hear that. And we of course, welcome feedback if it is difficult. But basically, we really are trying to make this process seem as simple as possible. And how can we help with all sorts of different situations?
Oh, right. And we'll put up both of those websites so that people will have them available and they can look into them.
We also have a number, which is a phone number.
Okay,
so for those that may not have access to the internet, we also have that as well. And that's, would you like that number?
Oh, sure. Why don't you tell me?
It's 612-348-5151.
Yeah, because we don't want to leave out people that don't have access to the internet.
Yeah.
Sure, I'll put that one up on the screen too, so that if you have a computer and that kind of access, go with the website because there's a lot of information.
Right.
Otherwise, go with the phone number if you have any questions.
Right.
Now, voting is a constitutional right. It's not a privilege for people. It's a right that they have. And I thought we'd talk a little bit first about what percentage of people in Hennepin County voted in the last major election that we had, that was in 2010.
Right, so in 2010 we had about 60% turnout total wide, and this is based on registered voters. This is not based on population, but it's based on registered voter count. In the upcoming election, which is a presidential election year, we always go typically a little bit higher. So for example, in 2008 we saw about 77%.
Okay.
And those numbers for 2012 will add up to be about 650,000 people on election day voting
for all of Hennepin County.
For all of Hennepin County, and for us, it's really exciting to serve that many people in one day.
Oh, right. And we're hoping that tonight, those of you who are watching our program out there, that you'll think about voting if you haven't voted before, because I'm sure there's new young voters out there, people from other countries that are just eligible to vote, and maybe some of you that maybe haven't ever voted in the past. But we hope that we'll give you information tonight that'll make you start thinking about, oh, well, maybe I should. And we'll give you some ideas where to get information about candidates too. So we want to stress that we hope that many of you out in the audience who haven't taken advantage of voting will do so this fall.
But the cities also hire election judges, so maybe if some of your viewers are interested in serving as an election judge, that's the city clerk would be the person to contact.
Okay, this would be a good time to contact them
It
because
would
they're
be.
putting
Yes.
all the parts and pieces of the process together.
Yes.
And so the role of Hennepin County is mainly to help the cities and the school districts, right? Because they each run their own elections.
It's basically to just sort of serve as a kind of a hub, or to really make sure that we're working together to make sure that everyone's on the same page.
Okay.
And for example, there are a lot of envelopes and forms, and those envelopes and forms are important because that's really what shows the materials, the integrity of the materials themselves. And so we work on things like that ahead of time.
And then what's the role of the Secretary of State's office too?
The Secretary of State's office, again, is part of this partnership of people throughout the state. And like Hennepin County is sort of the glue with all of our cities and school district, the Secretary of State is the glue for all of the 87 counties throughout the state. And they actually provide training to the county officials throughout the state of Minnesota. And they do a variety of things, like they'll publish guides.
Oh, right.
And they do a lot of get out the vote initiatives as well.
So they're more involved in wanting to increase the number of voters.
They do a lot of they do a lot of that, and then they have an elections office that specifically works on election administration issues. So
that's kind of the behind the scenes nuts and bolts that make it happen, right?
Yeah, I would say, I think, sometimes my family asks, do you work all year long? And I say, we do, we really do. And preparation for election day starts way in advance. I mean, we start, for a big election, like 2012, we had started already almost a year ago planning.
Yeah, lots of details that have to all come together where people don't even notice it, right?
Right, and that's what we hope.
Yeah. Now, the first thing we'll start off with, and we'll talk about new voters, the first step that they can take. They don't have to take it right now, but people that haven't voted before can register to vote, because that's a primary part of the process. And what requirements does a new voter need to meet in order, who's eligible to vote? Because we'll start out with who that would be.
Okay, so eligibility in Minnesota requires that you have to be 18 years of age. You have to be a U.S. citizen.
Okay.
You have to have resided in Minnesota for 20 days.
Okay.
Not where you're living now, but just in the state of Minnesota for 20 days preceding election day.
Right.
And you can't be under a felony conviction, so meaning you are, a lot of times we talked about records being discharged or expired or completed or off paper is sometimes okay, but so you can't be under felony. You can't be under court-ordered guardianship, and court-ordered is important because it does have to be court-ordered to be under guardianship, and you cannot be ruled legally incompetent.
Okay.
So, otherwise,
everybody else is eligible, right?
Yes.
And then I think the first two questions on the voter registration form deal with your age and your citizens, right?
That's correct.
So those are the two kind of eligibility questions that are on that form.
The form the form itself too has a list of the eligibility criteria at the signature line. So no one has to memorize that, but if they look at the form, they can see what the requirements are right there listed for them.
So there's a lot of people out there eligible that aren't registered, right?
It's true, and even just updating registration is important. Anytime you move, change your name, like if you get married or divorced. Or if you haven't voted for 4 consecutive years. And then you need to submit a new registration.
So if any of you out there fit any of those categories, think about the fact that you might want to get ready and register to vote for this fall's election. And the point at which somebody in the past needs to re-register would be these things that you just mentioned, right? So, because if you registered over 4 years ago, that's not going to count, right?
If you registered over 4 years ago, but then you haven't voted for 4 years, then you need to re-register. There is a really great tool on the website now that allows people to actually look up and check their registration status. So if people are not sure if they're registered or not, which is very easy to not necessarily remember, then they can look it up online. And I think the other big thing is in July, the county will actually be sending out postcards to all registered voters.
Oh, because of the
redistricting.
Right, the redistricting part, right.
So we will actually, so if you don't get a postcard from us in July, then you know you're probably not registered or need to re-register.
Okay, watch for the postcard. Or go on the Hennepin County website. And I remember it was easy to find, because when I saw it, I thought, I didn't know that I could do this.
Yeah, it's great. It's just a brand new tool that was introduced in just 2 years ago. So we're very excited about it, and I think it's a great tool for anyone that just wants to double check.
Right. So that you can go and do that. Now, what are the different ways that people can register to vote? Where can they go, or how can they get the information and go through that process?
Well, there really are 2 primary ways. One is to do it ahead of time. And you can do it by mail, you can do it by in person. There are forms on the website. You can pick them up at the libraries. There are lots of ways to get a voter registration application. By calling us at Hennepin County, we will send you one. And
we'll have the phone number up.
Yes, and then either mail it back or sometimes we get them delivered. But so there's doing that ahead of time, or the other option is to register on election day. The big difference is that on election day, if someone is going to register, they need to show ID at the time.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, because you need to list your ID on the voter registration form, right?
You do. That is one of the criteria.
But on election day, you have to physically have it with you.
On election day, if you're going to register on election day, you have to have some form of ID. Yes.
Okay, so they can go on the website and get an application. Now, you can get it from your city halls too, can't you?
Yes, that's correct. You can get it from City Hall. Any of the city election officials would be happy to help.
And libraries, and then Hennepin County offices?
Yeah, but we're downtown. Nobody wants to.
Well, can you get it from like the county service centers?
Yes.
Okay.
And then also if people do their driver's license. So when they update their driver's license, there is a checkbox that you can do on the driver's license.
Oh, so that's a really easy way for people to register.
It is, yes.
Because they're providing all the information anyway, right?
Yeah. If they're updating their driver's license, it's a great tool.
So that we'll move on now. What's important to remember when you're filling out this form? We'll put the form up on the screen so people can look at it as we're talking about it. But what's important to remember when you're filling out this form? Because you might have gotten at any of these spots you're looking at and you think, oh, all right, how am I going to be sure I do it right?
Well, I think there's some mandatory things on the voter registration application. The really nice part is that those are shaded. So if you look at the voter registration application, it's actually shaded on the mandatory parts and the required parts. I think the other big thing is to make sure that the address is complete. Sometimes people will not necessarily put the north or the south. And that can really make a difference when we're entering in the information. And then to just print legibly. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, you have to deal with all of it when it comes into you, right?
And we want to make sure we get it right.
Oh, definitely. So be sure to have a complete address as you're filling it out.
Yes.
Any other areas where you sometimes find problems?
Sometimes we see date of birth. So to make sure put the date of birth in, and that's how we confirm that you're 18 or older. And then, of course, the signature to confirm that you do meet the eligibility requirements.
And you're attesting to the fact that everything on there is correct, right?
Yes. Let's see.
Okay, what kind of timelines are important in filling out this application?
Well, we do take the applications all year round. But 21 days before each election is the key date, because that's when voter registration cuts off. And the reason we do that is so that we can prepare the books for election day and get them printed in time.
So they can get out to every city.
Yes. Now, if there is an application submitted and we get it, maybe it comes in a week before the election. We could send a letter saying, it's called a notice of late registration. And the notice of late registration will say, we're really sorry, but you missed the 21-day deadline. But you can bring that along with you to the polling place. So we take them all the time.
So that helps.
Yeah.
And so, we'll encourage the people watching us, if you aren't registered, take the time now when it's not, it isn't the deadline, you aren't facing when you need to get it in, and take the time now to get it registered. Just stop at one of the places that we mentioned, or go on the internet.
Yes.
Because that's an easy place to print out the application.
Yes, and we are so excited to help people right now, and we're ready. So this is a good time to really take care of those things.
So hopefully some of the people out watching us will listen and follow through on what you were telling them. Now, returning the application, there's probably a number of places you can bring it back to. Now, you can mail it in, obviously, but are there other places that you can turn it in? You
can turn it in at City Hall.
Okay.
You can also turn it in just by mail. Put a stamp on it and mail it to us, and that's probably the best way to.
Okay. All right. Now you could come to Hennepin County's offices if you happen to be downtown.
If you happen to be downtown and you.
Or the registry or the Hennepin County service centers.
Sure.
Right, because those would be all places where they could do it. And then when you're all through and you've turned it in, if you're in doubt at all, you should either get a card back or look on that registry place on the Hennepin County website.
Yes.
And that'll verify that you are ready to go.
Yes. So we do send a postcard after we receive the card, and then we send a postcard to confirm the registration.
Now, those cards don't need to be brought to the polls, though, right?
Right.
Okay. That's just to let you know that you're ready to go.
That's exactly. And to also let you know where you go and vote. And,
Oh, yeah, your polling place.
and the districts that you live in.
Right. Now, the other thing that you can do is registering to vote on Election Day. And what are the different kinds of forms that people should bring with them to verify their residence? Because that's important. When they go to using your address, you can go on the website and find your precinct. Okay, because you got to get to the right place to vote first in the first place, right?
Right.
And what kind of forms should people bring with them if they haven't registered and they're registering on Election Day?
Okay. Well, there's a whole list.
Okay.
And so I always encourage people, if they need to register on Election Day, is to look at that list before they head to the polling place.
Ah, good idea.
Because the last thing anybody wants to do is go to the polling place, fill out their card, stand in line and fill out their application, and then not have the right form of ID and have to go back home and get it. So I really encourage people to either call us or to look online before they head to the polling place if they're not sure. And here's my recommendation is if you have a Minnesota driver's license or identification card with your current name and address on it.
Yeah, because it has to have where you're living now.
Exactly. So it's showing who you are and where you live.
Right.
If you have that, that's all you need.
Okay.
So I would say that takes care of about 60 to 70% of the people who register on Election Day. The next group is those people that maybe haven't updated their driver's license yet.
Ah, right.
And they have a couple options. They could go update their driver's license and bring in that yellow copy with them.
Right.
Or the other big option is that they could bring in their old driver's license. So maybe the address isn't fixed yet.
Right.
But they bring in a utility bill along with that driver's license to show where they live. There are some conditions on the utility bill. Things like they have to have their name. It has to have their address. It has to be due within 30 days of the election, before or after the election.
So it has to be a current one.
It has to be a current one. But again, if those are the two most popular forms. There are other options, but if I would say if voters need that, to probably call and just check with us before they head to the polling place.
Yeah, because there's other. I was thinking if people live on a tribal reservation, then that
tribal ID
things
works.
like that would work. But better to check it out ahead of time, like you said, to know that you've got the right information with you. Now, another way is that a voter can confirm that the person lives where they live. On Election Day. Why don't you go through that process, how it works?
Well, my favorite scenario is the husband and wife who just moved together. They move on November 1st, and if it's Election Day on November 6th, they maybe haven't, maybe they just haven't gotten everything yet done. The driver's license are still with the old address. And so maybe the husband got maybe the utility bill was in the husband's name, for example. So the husband has a utility bill and the old driver's license, and he brings that along with his wife to the polling place. And because the wife only has the driver's license, he can actually register on Election Day, and then he can confirm or vouch for her, because they are in the same polling place. And they know they have personal knowledge of each other. So that's my favorite example. Sometimes it happens with neighbors or roommates, but that's really the best example I can give.
And then the husband would sign a form stating this is so. It's like a legal form that has to be signed,
It is yes.
Now, if you don't have the items from question 1, you can bring a couple other forms I was reading on your website. Maybe you can tell about that.
Well, a lot of them, it depends if you're a student. It will depend if you're, it just really depends on the situation for some of these other types. So I really encourage folks that if they don't have either one of those items or someone that can vouch for them, then, really look on the internet because...
because you don't want somebody to come with the wrong information,
Yeah, especially if, again, I just, really want to encourage people to feel like they know what to bring and feel confident about that before they head to the polling place.
Okay, so have your voter's ID or your driver's license with the address where you live now. those either one of those would suffice for a large bulk of people.
Right. The Minnesota driver's license or identification
Okay.
card with the current name and address.
And then if you've recently moved and don't have a driver's license that has your current address yet, you may register to change it and have that form, or your old driver's license and you set a current utility bill in your name.
Exactly. With the new address.
Right, with the new address
Yes.
on it. Or somebody that can vouch for you, like a husband for a wife.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought we'd talk a little bit about the fact there's a lot of people in the room as you come in to vote, and they're election judges. So I thought we should tell people a little bit about who these are. What are the duties of election judges? All these people that are in the room as you go to vote, sitting behind the tables.
Well, election judges are just near and dear to my heart because they work long days. They start sometimes at 5 in the morning, and they really go till sometimes midnight, getting and making sure. Long days, yes. But some of them have shorter hours.
Okay.
But they're really there they take pride in our election system, and they're there to administer the process.
Right.
And so many of these folks really just want to do good to their community.
Right.
So election judges are fantastic, and we always need more.
Okay. So if maybe some people out there are thinking, oh, maybe I should do that. Some of our already voters that are familiar with the process. Who do they contact?
Their city clerk.
Okay. Are there qualifications that you need to meet to be an election judge?
There are, although it's pretty simple. You need to be eligible to vote, so you have to meet those eligibility criteria. You need to be able to read, write, and speak English.
Okay.
And you can't be the spouse, parent, child, or sibling of any other election judge or in the same precinct or a candidate on the ballot.
Okay.
So there are a few things.
Right.
But mostly it's a fun job, and we really encourage young people to get involved in this process as well.
Right. Yeah, the age doesn't matter.
Age does not matter.
So students can be part of the process.
They sure can, and we love having our high school students. In some cases, they can serve if they are 16 years of age.
Okay.
Because we call them a trainee election judge.
Okay.
But what a great way to see people come through. And
see the whole process as it's happening.
Yeah.
So if they're thinking about it, they could get hold of their city clerk.
Yes.
And they can see what they need in that area and go through the city clerk to be able to be part of that process.
Yeah, most of the time it requires another form to be filled out.
Right.
But it also requires some training. So there is election judge training, and then they serve on election day.
Thank you for taking time to learn a lot about voting, particularly if you live in Hennepin County area, all the different ways that you can register to vote, ways that you can find out your polling place, ways that you can check on absentee ballots. We're glad that you've been with us, and we'll continue this show next week, and we'll hope that we've stimulated some of you into thinking about getting registered and getting ready to vote, especially if you're in Golden Valley. We encourage you to find out information. There's 2 city council positions that are open and 1 mayoral position. So we encourage you to find out about the people that are running for these offices and then take time to actually vote when November 3rd comes around. Bye.